And we are live. Hello, everyone. This is My Two Cents. Welcome back to my channel. So, inflation. It's something we've talked about for quite some time, going back to, well, even before this, but especially when the COVID-19 pandemic first started and I was doing my weekly update on COVID-19 stream. My prediction from the start was this, that with all the money the government was printing to try to keep the economy afloat, everything was going to stay relatively normal, given the fact that a lot of businesses were shut down. The whole lockdown procedures made it such that people were saving rather than spending. However, a point was finally going to come where, like it or not, the lockdowns were going to have to come up, end. As soon as that happened, people are going to run out and start spending all the money they've been saving over this time. All that money comes flooding back to the economy, and we will get a hyperinflation. Well, and as a lot of people ask me, well, like, what exactly is that point going to be? What's going to cause it to happen? And unfortunately, I always had to answer, I don't know exactly what is going to trigger that, but whenever it does, it's going to happen rather rapidly. So now this week, I'm asking the question, have we reached that point where we've got the straw that broke the camel's back? And there are a couple articles I want to look at here. This first is from the Wall Street Journal. Powell gets his inflation wish. So Jerome Powell, chairman of the Fed, who for weeks now has been asked questions about inflation, he's repeatedly assured the American people that inflation is only transitory. In other words, it's temporary, and it's really nothing to worry about. In fact, I did see a clip of him earlier this week saying that there was a time when printing a lot of money would necessarily lead to inflation, but in our modern economy, that just doesn't happen. So let's take a look here. So Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell's inflation ship has come in, albeit more rudely than he probably wanted. The Consumer Price Index rose a remarkable 4.2% at an annual rate in April and 3% in its core measure that excludes food and energy. Bear in mind, the Fed considers a 2% annual inflation rate to be ideal, and it's 4.2%, so more than twice what they consider to be ideal. The surge in prices won't surprise most Americans who have been paying more everywhere from the grocery store to cars to the housing market. Prices in April rose across the board, but especially for goods and services in lower demand during the lockdowns. Hotel prices increased 8.8% for the month and 8.1% year over year, and monthly increase 0.9% less. Food and energy was the largest since 1982. So, inflation is pretty darn high. I believe the number of Google searches for what is inflation are higher than they've been since pretty much they started keeping track of Google searches. Mainstream investors like Warren Buffett have come out and said, yeah, we see a lot of inflation on the horizon. The only one left, it seems, who isn't worried about inflation is Jerome Powell himself. And of course, former Fed chairmen like Ben Bernanke have admitted that when you're the chairman of the Fed, you can't actually tell the truth about what you really believe. Pre-2008, when the housing crisis was coming, Ben Bernanke, who was then chairman of the Fed, has admitted in later interviews that he didn't really believe there were no problems in the mortgage market. He knew it was coming, but he had to publicly state there was no problem because he knew that if he said there was a problem coming, it was going to send the entire nation into a collapse, which of course happened anyways, but he had to lie about it because he knew if he told the truth, it would make everything worse right then, and that's exactly the position Jerome Powell is in right now. So skipping down here, commodities have also been surging and are feeding into consumer prices. Corn prices are up 50% this year and some 125% year over year. Overall food prices climbed 0.4% and 2.4% over the past 12 months. Fresh produce and meat prices rose even more. A worker shortage is also pushing up wages. Average hourly earnings rose 0.7% in April and may be starting to feed into higher consumer prices. Well, duh. We've still got plenty of Americans who are on unemployment right now who are actually making more money not working than they would if they actually started to work. So it's no surprise then that they're choosing to stay on unemployment rather than go back to work. But of course that exacerbates the problem. We got basically the perfect storm of economic juice that's creating this crisis, because on one hand, the federal government ever since, well, for a long time now, but ever since the COVID-19 pandemic especially, has been printing money like mad in order to keep funding itself, in order to keep paying benefits and stimulus checks to everyone because they're so greatly in need. Of course, all that additional money chasing a smaller amount of goods is bound to lead to inflation. But also, when you've got fewer people working, more businesses shutting down, you've got fewer goods and services being produced. So as it is, there are fewer goods and services than there were before, a higher supply of money, and then a smaller labor force because people are choosing not to work rather than go to work. So anyone who understands basic supply and demand knows that this can only go one way, and that is that prices will have to rise as more money is chasing that smaller amounts of goods and services. But of course, we know in practice that's not really what happens. When prices start to rise so drastically, people start crying out for the government, "You've got to help us!" And which brings me to the other thing that happened this week, which is the gas shortages around the nation. So let me quick switch articles here. So, gas shortages. I'm sure everyone is aware by now that this past week there was a cyber attack on the Colonial Pipeline, which provides much of the gasoline to the East Coast. And as a result, there have been gas shortages all along the East Coast, especially in places like South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia. And as there have been gas shortages, people, I'm sure you saw all the clips of people running off to the gas stations to buy as much gas as they could, fill all their gas, top off their cars, fill gas cans so that they have as much as they can just in case they run out. There were a couple hilarious clips of women trying to fill like laundry baskets with gas and plastic grocery bags with gas and everything else. But of course, basic supply and demand would dictate that when there's increased demand for a smaller amount of gasoline, you would raise prices. But of course, when that happens, people start to complain of price gouging. And got an article here from ABC 13 News. More than 500 reports of price gouging filed in Virginia. As gas shortages plagued the Southeast over the last week, hundreds of Virginians have filed price gouging complaints. A week ago Friday, Colonial Pipeline was a victim of a ransomware cyber attack. The company shut down its network to keep sensitive infrastructure from being affected. Colonial Pipeline serves much of the East Coast, providing about half the gas to Southeast from Louisiana to New Jersey. News of the pipeline shutdown led to week-long gas shortage in some southern states, such as Virginia, the Carolinas, and even D.C., where flustered consumers flocked to their local convenience stores, oftentimes, as has been well documented this week on social media, hoarding fuel. Well, of course, I made a video about this responding to the Canadian Prime Minister and his claims about price gouging back when it came to toilet paper. This has been explained over and over and over again, but price gouging is the only thing that can correct the shortage. When there is a shortage of any supply of goods, the prices rise to compensate for the increased demand. Yes, that means that temporarily there are some people that are not able to get that good and service. However, if for example, we'll just take the gasoline example. There's a shortage of gasoline, so gasoline prices rise, and there are some people who cannot afford to buy gasoline. Well, states nearby that do have gasoline will see the higher gas prices, and they will be directly incentivized to transport their gasoline to these areas where shortages are to take advantage of the higher prices. As they do that, the supply increases very quickly, given the motivation of those suppliers to benefit from the high prices, which then drives the prices back down. However, when you have passed laws against price gouging or report these businesses say you're not allowed to charge more, well, there's no incentive for those additional suppliers to bring more supply, so instead everyone just buys as much as they possibly can, ensuring that some people, like these idiots who are filling laundry baskets full of gasoline, have more gasoline than they could possibly use, and that gasoline is probably going to go bad before they can even use it anyways. And then you have some people who need gasoline who aren't able to get it because the pumps are empty. And of course, that only prolongs the shortage, ensures more people suffer. So, moving on to the next article I want to take a look at, though, but that also brings us to beyond the shortages, I also want to talk about the labor shortage. There's a great article that was in Market Watch this week regarding minimum wage and unemployment benefits right now. So, opinion. I own a small business. This is what a $15 minimum wage means for me. So, after President Biden required federal contractors to pay a $15 minimum wage and Rhode Island inched closer to its own mandate, small business owners held their breath. Congress is again likely to consider hiking the federal minimum wage, now $7.25, affecting the public and private sectors alike. So, I'm going to skip down here. So this is a small business owner who is writing this article. He says, as a small business owner, here are the numbers. I recently sought to hire an employee to answer phones for my Florida-based real estate firm. The hours would be from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday. 3 people responded to my job posting. One was already making $15 an hour on unemployment, a problem in itself. He said it would only be worth his time if I would pay $25 per hour. However, $25 an hour is actually closer to $29 per hour when you factor in Social Security taxes and other employment costs. I would also need to take into account paid vacation time, 401k contributions, and health insurance expenses. Others said, I can make more from home doing nothing, and I'm not doing any work for $15 per hour. And of course, when they are making more money doing nothing, it makes sense that they would say that. But it also shows that when you have these shortages and increased prices, people are going to start demanding more to work because they want to make a living wage. Well, if employers can't pay, are only going to have 2 choices. They can either not employ those people and try to produce their goods and services with fewer employees, which of course is going to continue the shortage, or they can raise their wages and pass those costs on to the consumer, which ensures that prices rise even further, causing people to again ask for a raise in their wages. And this will continue to go on forever because every time because in order for the government to keep funding itself, it has to keep printing more money. It's completely lost its ability to gain any money from taxes. We can already see in states like California and New York where the taxes on the rich are already as high as they can possibly be, and they're raising them higher. The rich just peace out. They sell their properties. They move somewhere where taxes are lower. You can only tax them so much before they decide it's not worth it to even keep working. So the government can't make more money by raising taxes, and Biden says he won't, yet he wants to spend an additional $10 trillion, probably more than that. So he's going to keep printing money. The only way to cause this problem to subside would be basically if the government just shut down everything entirely, shut down all its projects, foreign wars, sent all its employees home without pay, and waited for the economy to stabilize and find price levels to account for the supply of money. But so long as they keep pumping money into the economy, and it seems very clear that's exactly what they're going to do. People like Powell is making clear he's got no intent of raising interest rates. It's the cycle of prices go up, people demand higher wages, the wages get raised, but then they're forced to raise prices even higher, and every time the government prints more money to help people out and cover those costs, it just makes the problem even worse. It's only going to go on for so long before people are finally going to realize the US dollar is utterly worthless. We got to get rid of it. And I think we are getting very, very close to that point right now. Jonathan O. asks, so is it too late to solve this problem? The answer, I would say yes, it absolutely is. The government has sealed its fate because at this point the Fed is between a rock and a hard place. If it continues to print money, we're going to go into a hyperinflation. If it tries to raise rates to stop the inflation, the government's not going to be able to fund itself. So either way, the U.S. dollar is going to collapse. And this harkens back to a particular time in the Roman Empire. This is the last article I want to look at during this stream. But all these problems we're seeing in the economy, they've happened before. In fact, they've happened many a time. But perhaps one of the most similar examples is in ancient Rome when the Emperor Diocletian passed his infamous Edict of Prices. So this is an article that was originally written by none other than Murray Rothbard himself. But citizens of the old Roman Empire distrusted paper currency and refused to accept anything but gold and silver coin as money. So the rulers found themselves barred from inflating the money supply by unobtrusive method of printing additional currency. But the Roman emperors soon discovered an ingenious device. They proceeded to call in the coins of the realm, ostensibly for repairs. Then, by various means, such as filing off small parts of the coins or introducing cheaper alloys, they reduced the silver content of the money without changing its original face value. This devaluation enabled them to add many more silver coins to the Roman money supply. This practice was started by Nero and accelerated by his successors. By Diocletian's time, the denarius, which was the standard silver coin, had been reduced to 1/10 of its former value. The result was a steep rise in prices throughout the vast Roman Empire. As has happened throughout history, the public indigently accused merchants and speculators speculators of causing the rise in prices. It was generally agreed that the only remedy was stringent maximum price controls by the government. And accordingly, Emperor Diocletian, a, quote, friend of the people, issued his famous edict in 301 setting ceiling prices on all types of commodities and maximum wages for all occupations. And then it goes through some of those things. But if anyone could force people to trade at ceiling prices, Diocletian was the man. Yet the absolute emperor of the civilized world, a veteran general with myriads of secret police at his command, was soon forced to surrender. After a short interval, almost nothing was offered for sale, and there was a great scarcity of all goods. Diocletian was obliged to repeal the price-fixing edict. Prices finally stabilized in 307 AD when the government stopped diluting the money supply. In other words, government can try to help the people by attacking these greedy businesses and saying, you're not allowed to charge more money than that. Of course, when people are told they're not allowed to charge the amount of money they need to for it to actually be worthwhile, they just stop selling. And that is exactly what I think we're going to see happening in the coming weeks. As there are vast shortages of goods, prices are going to rise. People are going to cry out. Government's going to step in like they're doing, we saw in Virginia and other states here with regards to gas, and say, you're price gouging. You're not allowed to charge that much. But while simultaneously saying to business owners, you're not allowed to pay your employees less than $15 an hour or whatever else. You have to pay them a living wage. And when businesses realize they can't possibly comply with both these edicts, they're just going to close down. The initial shortage of goods and services is going to become an extreme shortage of goods and services, and I anticipate rioting in the streets. It is not going to be pretty. So, I've been saying for the past year, you guys need to prepare. At this point, the time has really come and gone. If you haven't prepared at all, it is not going to be pretty. The few things I will say, if you have large amounts of cash in your bank account right now, you need to buy something, whether it's gold, whether it's silver, whether it's cryptocurrency, but I'd say more importantly commodities, whether it's canned food or any other commodity that you're going to need to sustain yourself in the coming weeks. I would have supplies of all those things, because as the shortages, the growth of these shortages is going to be exponential, and if you don't have it, you might be out of luck. And no need to really beat a dead horse there. Just, I think we have reached the straw that broke the camel's back, and I think it's going to go from bad to worse very, very quickly. As always, that is my 2 cents. You can take it for what it's worth.